The massive room inside the Galactic Council building was filled with worried voices and nervous energy. Today was supposed to be another normal meeting, but something was very wrong. The human seats were empty for the first time in 300 years. Ambassador Kang Hyan sat quietly in his private room on the human ship called Soul Pride. He looked at his communication device that kept beeping with new messages. Every few minutes another alien government tried to contact him. Some were angry, some were confused, and some sounded scared, but Kang Hyan just turned off the sound and went back to reading his book. The trouble started 3 weeks ago when the Vorthan Empire decided they wanted to take over 3 human colony worlds. The Vorthans were big gray aliens who looked like walking rocks. They always tried to push other species around and take what they wanted. This time they found an old treaty from 50 years ago and said it gave them the right to mine on human planets. Everyone expected the humans to get angry and start shouting like they usually did in the council meetings. Everyone expected long speeches about rights and fairness and justice. But instead something happened that nobody saw coming. The humans just stopped talking. It started small at first. Human ambassadors would smile politely when other aliens tried to talk to them about politics, but they would not answer any questions about their government. They would talk about the weather or ask about alien families, but the moment someone mentioned treaties or territories, the humans would just smile and change the subject, and human embassies around the galaxy started closing down. Not in a dramatic way with angry speeches or threats. They just packed up their things, thanked their alien friends for their hospitality, and left. The buildings were cleaned and locked, and the human flags were folded up and taken away. The aliens tried everything to get the humans to respond. The Centaurian Federation sent their best negotiators to Earth, but the humans at the spaceport were very polite and helpful with landing procedures and fuel supplies, but refused to discuss anything political. The negotiators were given nice hotel rooms and excellent meals, but no government officials would meet with them. Council Speaker Thex Mala was a giant bug-like creature from the Kepler hive. His kind usually stayed calm in any crisis, but today he was clicking his mouth parts nervously as he looked at the empty human section. The humans had been part of the council for 200 years. Their money, their technology, and their powerful military ships helped keep peace in the galaxy. Now they were gone and nobody knew why. What made everything worse was that human trade ships kept working normally. Captain Park Soo-jin commanded a big cargo ship called Bison Runner. She would fly to alien ports and negotiate prices for her goods. She was friendly and professional with alien traders and port officials. But when they asked her about Earth government or human politics, she would just smile and say that was not her job. She was there to deliver goods, and that was all. The same thing happened everywhere. Humans worked. Human doctors kept treating alien patients in galactic hospitals but would not talk about Earth politics. Human engineers kept fixing alien machines and building alien structures but refused to discuss their government. Human teachers kept teaching alien children but avoided all questions about human society. The Vorthans had expected humans to fight back with angry words and threats in the council chambers. They had prepared for shouting matches and legal battles. They had written long speeches about why they deserved the human colonies, but instead they found themselves facing complete silence. The humans were not arguing with them or even acknowledging that a problem existed. Ambassador Veltar was the chief Vorthan negotiator. He was used to getting his way through loud threats and legal tricks, but you cannot threaten someone who will not listen to your threats. You cannot negotiate with someone who refuses to acknowledge you exist. Veltar found himself shouting at empty chairs and making threats to aliens who were not there. The silence was spreading fear through the galactic community. Human military ships kept patrolling their assigned areas and protecting trade routes from pirates, but they stopped sending reports to alien military commands. Human scientists kept publishing research papers but avoided all conferences where aliens might ask political questions. Human artists kept creating beautiful works but declined all invitations to cultural exchange programs. Dr. Kim Min-ho was a famous human economist who studied galactic trade. His research papers were read by alien government officials across the galaxy. 3 days after the diplomatic silence began, he published a new paper about economic connections between different species. The paper did not mention politics at all, but it showed exactly how much the galaxy depended on human businesses for everything from food production to Starship Fuel, the paper was written in simple language that anyone could understand. It showed charts and numbers that proved human companies were involved in almost every major industry. Human factories made parts for alien machines. Human farms grew food that fed billions of alien citizens. Human banks provided loans that kept alien businesses running. Human transport companies moved goods between different star systems. Reading the paper, alien leaders realized something that scared them. The humans had become so important to the galactic economy that losing them would cause massive problems. Millions of aliens would lose their jobs. Entire industries would collapse without human technology and expertise. Food shortages would happen on planets that depended on human agricultural products, but the paper never said this directly. It just presented facts and numbers and let readers figure out the implications for themselves. This made it even more frightening because it seemed like a threat without actually being a threat. The humans were not saying they would cut off trade or stop providing services. They were just showing how much damage would happen if they did. Factory owner Choi Young-sik ran a huge manufacturing complex on the industrial world of Proxima Beta. His factories employed 30,000 alien workers and produced critical components for starships and medical equipment. When local alien authorities tried to pressure him about human government policies, he remained polite but firm. He explained that he was just a businessman trying to make good products and provide jobs for local workers. He said politics was not his concern and he would continue following all local laws and regulations as he always had, but he would not discuss anything related to Earth government or human political decisions. That was not his area of expertise, he said. With a friendly smile, the alien authorities found themselves in an impossible situation. Choi was breaking no laws and causing no problems. His factories were clean and safe, his workers were well paid, and his products were excellent quality. There was no legal reason to take action against him. But his refusal to engage with political pressure was clearly part of a larger coordinated plan. This same scene played out on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. Human business owners and managers maintained their professional duties while completely avoiding political discussions. They were following all laws and regulations perfectly, making it impossible for alien governments to take action against them. But their coordinated silence was obviously planned and executed with military precision. The Galactic Trade Commission held emergency meetings to discuss the human situation, but there was nothing they could do. Human businesses were operating legally and professionally. The only thing that had changed was their willingness to discuss politics, and that was not something any law could force them to do. Meanwhile, back on the council ship Soul Pride, Ambassador Kong Hien finished his book and looked out the window at the stars. He had been a diplomat for 30 years and had negotiated treaties with dozens of alien species. He knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was absolutely nothing at all. His communication device showed over 200 unread messages from alien governments. Some were offering deals, some were making threats, and some were just asking what the humans wanted. But Kang Han had his orders, and those orders were very simple. Do not engage with any political discussions until further notice. The silence was working exactly as planned. The aliens were starting to panic, and that panic would only grow stronger as they realized how much they needed human cooperation. The humans were not breaking any treaties or laws. They were simply choosing not to participate in galactic politics, and that choice was driving their enemies crazy. As night fell on the council station, alien representatives gathered in small groups, whispering about the human situation. Nobody knew what to do next. The humans had found a way to become untouchable while remaining completely visible. They were still there, still working, still contributing to galactic society, but politically they had vanished into thin air. The silence was louder than any threat could ever be. 3 weeks had passed since the humans stopped talking to alien governments, and the galaxy was starting to feel real pain. The problem was not just political anymore. It was hitting everyone where it hurt most: their wallets and their jobs. CEO Lee Dahi sat in her office high above the bustling city of New Seoul on the mining world of Titan 7. Her company Terra Holdings controlled the largest rare earth mining operation in 3 star systems. Every day her ships carried precious metals and crystals to alien worlds that needed them for everything from computer chips to starship engines. Her desk was covered with urgent messages from alien business partners, the Centaurian Trade Federation had sent their most important negotiators. To meet with her, they wanted to use business pressure to force the human government to start talking again, but Lee Dahi had a simple answer for them. She called a meeting with all her alien partners and spoke to them through video link from her office. She wore her best business suit and smiled politely as she delivered her message. Terra Holdings would continue all existing contracts and honor every agreement they had made. Business was business and politics was politics if anyone tried to mix the two things together, they would find their contracts canceled immediately. The Centaurian negotiators thought she was bluffing. They had been buying rare earth metals from Terra Holdings for 15 years. Their entire electronics industry depended on those materials. They controlled the largest fleet of cargo ships in their sector and thought that gave them power over human companies. They were wrong. Within 6 hours of threatening to use political pressure against Terra Holdings, they received formal notice that all their contracts were terminated effective immediately. Their ships were turned away from human mining stations. Their orders were canceled and their deposits were refunded. The humans were perfectly polite about it, but absolutely firm. The shock waves spread through the Centaurian economy like wildfire. Their biggest electronics manufacturer had to shut down production lines because they could not get the materials they needed. Stock prices crashed as investors realized how dependent they were on human suppliers. Other companies started panic buying from non-human sources, but there were not enough alternative suppliers to meet demand. Dr. Kim Min-ho watched the economic chaos from his office at the Terran Economic Institute. He was the human who had written the research paper that showed how connected human businesses were to the galactic economy. Now he was writing a follow-up paper that would terrify alien governments even more. His new research showed exactly what happened when human businesses separated politics from commerce. The genius of the strategy was becoming clear. Human companies could maintain their economic power while becoming politically untouchable. Alien governments could not pressure them through traditional diplomatic channels, but they also could not afford to lose human business partnerships. The numbers in his report were frightening. A complete human economic withdrawal would cause a recession that would last for decades. Unemployment would rise to dangerous levels on hundreds of worlds. Food shortages would affect billions of alien citizens. Transportation systems would break down without human technology. Manufacturing would collapse without human materials and expertise. But the report never threatened anyone directly. It just presented cold, hard facts about economic relationships. The message was clear. The galaxy needed humans far more than humans needed the galaxy, and now the humans had found a way to prove it without starting a war on the industrial world of Kepler Prime factory owner Troy Young-sik was dealing with his own pressure from local authorities. The planetary government had called him to an emergency meeting. They wanted him to use his influence with human suppliers to pressure Earth into resuming diplomatic talks. Troy sat calmly in the government conference room surrounded by angry alien officials. He listened politely to their demands and then gave them his answer. He was a businessman, not a diplomat. His job was to manufacture high-quality products and employ local workers. Politics was not his area of expertise. Aliens threatened to shut down his factories, but Troy just smiled and reminded them of something important. His factories employed 300,000 alien workers across the planet. They produced medical equipment that saved lives in alien hospitals every day. They manufactured components for the water purification systems that provided clean drinking water to 50 million alien citizens. If they shut down his factories, the alien government would have to explain to their citizens why they no longer had jobs or clean water or medical equipment. The government officials realized they were trapped. They needed Choi more than he needed them. This same scenario was playing out across the galaxy. Human business owners remained friendly and professional while completely avoiding political discussions. They continued following old laws and regulations perfectly, making it impossible for alien governments to take legal action against them. But their coordinated refusal to engage with political pressure was clearly part of a larger plan. The hegemony of scales tried a different approach. They were a military-focused reptilian empire that believed in using force to solve problems. Their leader, General Vex Tor, thought he could intimidate human businesses into cooperation by making military threats. He was wrong, Captain Park. Tae-1 commanded the human merchant vessel Star of Bisan that regularly delivered manufactured goods to hegemony worlds. When hegemony officials tried to pressure him about human government policies, he remained polite but gave them a simple message: human merchant ships would continue delivering goods as long as they received payment and safe passage. Any attempts to use threats or force would result in immediate suspension of all trade relationships. The captain spoke calmly and smiled pleasantly. But his meaning was clear: the hegemony could choose between getting the goods they needed or playing political games, but they could not have both. The hegemony discovered that their threats were useless against someone who refused to be threatened. Human merchants would simply redirect their ships to other customers. The hegemony needed human manufactured goods more than humans needed hegemony money. There were always other buyers willing to pay fair prices without making political demands. Textile manufacturer Nam Yu-jin ran the largest clothing production facility in the Outer Rim territories. Her factories produced everything from basic work clothes to luxury fashions for alien consumers across dozens of worlds. When the Vorthan Empire tried to pressure her into supporting their territorial claims, she had a simple response: her factories would continue producing clothes, and her ships would continue delivering them to any customer who paid fair prices and treated her workers with respect. Politics was not her concern, and she would not discuss it. Any attempt to involve her business in political disputes would result in immediate termination of all contracts. The Vorthans found themselves in the same impossible position as everyone else. They could not threaten someone who refused to listen to threats. They could not pressure someone who would not engage with pressure. And they could not afford to lose access to human products that their citizens had come to depend on. The Galactic Trade Commission held emergency session after emergency session trying to find a solution to the human problem, but there was no solution because the humans were not actually breaking any rules. They were following all laws perfectly. They were honoring all existing contracts. They were treating alien partners fairly and professionally. The only thing they would not do was discuss politics, and no law in the galaxy could force anyone to have political conversations against their will. The humans had found a loophole in the entire system of galactic governance. They could participate in the economy while completely withdrawing from politics. Financial analyst Hong Soo-jin published a report that sent shockwaves through alien stock markets. Her analysis showed that human economic integration had become so deep that removing them would trigger the worst economic collapse in galactic history. Entire industries would disappear overnight. Millions of businesses would fail. Transportation networks would break down. Communication systems would stop working. But her report also showed something else. The humans had been planning this strategy for years. They had carefully positioned themselves to become economically essential, while maintaining the ability to withdraw politically at any time. It was the most sophisticated economic weapon ever created, and they had deployed it without anyone noticing until it was too late. The beauty of the strategy was that it was completely reversible. The humans could resume normal diplomatic relations at any time, making their withdrawal seem like a temporary misunderstanding rather than permanent hostility. This prevented alien governments from treating them as enemies while maximizing pressure to resolve disputes on human terms. As the economic tremors spread across the galaxy, alien leaders began to realize they were facing opponents who thought differently than anyone they had encountered before. The humans had turned their own economic success into a diplomatic weapon, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop them. The silence was becoming more expensive every day, and the bills were just starting to come due. The silence became truly terrifying when human military forces stopped talking to their alien allies. Admiral Song Ji-woo commanded the 5th Fleet stationed at Kepler Station, the most important military base in the Outer Rim territories. For 20 years, his ships had worked alongside alien fleets to fight pirates and protect trade routes. Now, his ships maintained their positions but refused all communication with alien military commands. The change happened overnight. One day, human and alien officers were sharing meals and planning joint operations. The next day, human Military personnel would nod politely when they passed alien colleagues in the corridors, but would not discuss anything related to military matters. They continued their duties perfectly, but treated their former allies like strangers. General Park Seong-min commanded the human garrison on New Jeju, a contested world that sat on the border between three different alien empires. His base housed 50,000 human soldiers and controlled the most advanced defense systems in the sector. The base had been built through cooperation between humans and aliens, but now the aliens found themselves locked out of their own joint facility. The Alien Intelligence Services tried everything to figure out what the humans were planning. They sent their best spies to watch human military bases, but the humans had become impossible to read. Human soldiers went about their daily routines with perfect discipline, but revealed nothing about their orders or intentions. What scared alien military leaders most was the realization that they had never really understood human military capabilities. During decades of cooperation, humans had shared some information about their weapons and tactics, but they had kept their most important secrets to themselves. Now that cooperation was over, alien generals discovered how little they actually knew about human military strength. The Andromedan Defense Pact held emergency meetings to discuss the human situation. Without human participation, their joint defense treaties became meaningless pieces of paper. They had no idea if humans would honor their commitments to defend alien worlds if they were attacked. They did not even know if humans still considered them allies or potential enemies. Captain Yoon Hae-won commanded the destroyer Incheon Fury that patrolled the dangerous Vorthen border region. When a group of pirate ships attacked a civilian convoy in his sector, he responded exactly as he always had. His ship destroyed the pirates quickly and efficiently, saving the lives of thousands of alien civilians. But then something different happened. Instead of filing the usual joint operations report with alien military authorities, Captain Yoon simply returned to his patrol route. The pirates were dead, the civilians were safe, but the political implications remained completely unclear. The humans were still protecting innocent lives, but they were doing it on their own terms. The hegemony of Scales had been quietly building up their military forces near human space for months. They believed humans were weak because they preferred negotiation to fighting. The diplomatic silence seemed like the perfect opportunity to test human resolve and maybe grab some valuable territory. General Vextor commanded the largest hegemony fleet ever assembled. He had been planning to probe human defenses and see how far he could push before the humans asked for help from their alien allies, but now he faced a completely different situation. The humans were not asking anyone for help because they were not talking to anyone at all. His intelligence officers tried to gather information about human fleet movements and military preparations, but they found nothing useful. Human ships continued their normal patrol patterns. Human bases maintained their usual defensive positions. Human soldiers followed their regular training schedules. Everything looked normal. But that normalcy was more frightening than any visible preparation for war. The problem was that apparent normalcy could be hiding anything human military doctrine had always emphasized: deception and misdirection. During wartime, their history was filled with examples of devastating surprise attacks launched from positions that looked completely peaceful. Maybe the humans were preparing for war. Maybe they were planning massive retaliation for the Vorthen territorial claims. Maybe they were just maintaining their defenses. General Vextor had no way to know, and that uncertainty made him afraid to take any aggressive action against human territory. He had expected to face frightened humans calling for help from their allies. Instead, he found himself staring at an enemy whose intentions were completely unreadable. The ethereal consortium tried to use their psychic abilities to read human military minds, but they encountered something that shocked them. Human soldiers had developed natural resistance to psychic intrusion. Some humans could even actively block telepathic attempts to scan their thoughts. Research in So Yan worked at the Terran Psychic Research Institute, where she had spent years developing countermeasures against psychic attacks. Her team had created training programs that taught human soldiers to protect their minds from alien telepaths. What had started as a defensive precaution was now serving as the perfect shield against unwanted mental contact. Ethereals found themselves locked out of human consciousness for the first time in their species' history. They had always been able to read the surface thoughts of other species, which gave them enormous advantages in negotiation and warfare. Now, they faced opponents whose minds were completely closed to the military analyst Dr. Beek Tay. Young published a research paper that circulated among human officers but was never shared with aliens. His analysis showed how alien military forces had become dependent on cooperation with human fleets. Human ships provided crucial capabilities that alien forces lacked, including advanced sensors, electronic warfare systems, and logistics support. Without human cooperation, alien fleets would find themselves blind and vulnerable in any major conflict. Their communication systems relied on human technology. Their supply lines depended on human transport ships. Their intelligence gathering used human surveillance networks the aliens had built. Their military strategy around human participation without realizing how much they needed that helped. The paper remained classified, but its conclusions were clear. The diplomatic silence had revealed a fundamental weakness in alien military planning. They had become so dependent on human support that they could not function effectively without it. But they had no way to force humans to resume cooperation because they did not understand what the humans wanted. Commander Ojihai laid a human Special Forces unit stationed on the neutral world of Crossroads Station. Her team had worked closely with alien special forces for years, conducting joint operations against terrorist groups and criminal organizations. Now her soldiers continued their missions but operated independently of their former alien partners. When alien commanders asked for her help with a hostage situation, she responded professionally but unhelpfully. She explained that her unit was authorized to protect human citizens and interests only. Any operations involving alien personnel would require authorization from higher command, and that authorization was not available. Hostage situation was resolved successfully by alien forces working alone, but it took them much longer and resulted in more casualties than necessary. The aliens realized they had grown accustomed to human expertise and efficiency. Without human participation, their operations became slower and more dangerous. Fleet Admiral Shin Hai-Ri commanded the human home defense forces from her headquarters on Earth. She had been expecting alien attempts to pressure the human government through military threats, but those threats never came. Instead, she watched as alien fleets became increasingly paralyzed by uncertainty about human intentions. Her intelligence reports showed alien military forces caught between two impossible choices. They could not attack human territory because they did not know how humans would respond. They could not ignore human territory because they did not know what humans were planning. The uncertainty was more effective than any actual threat could have been. The silence had turned human military forces into ghosts. They were visible and active, but impossible to understand or predict. Alien generals found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see, touch, or communicate with. The humans had achieved perfect strategic ambiguity, and their enemies were terrified of it. As weeks passed without any human military communication, alien defense ministers began to panic. Their carefully planned military strategies assumed human cooperation or at least human predictability. Now they faced opponents who could not be threatened, negotiated with, or understood. The human military silence was proving that sometimes the most powerful weapon was the one you never had to use. The aliens were defeating themselves through their own fear and uncertainty, while the humans simply continued their normal activities with perfect discipline and unreadable intentions. The galaxy had learned to fear the humans without the humans ever making a single threat. As months passed without any human response to diplomatic attempts, alien governments became increasingly desperate. They tried everything they could think of to force the humans back to the negotiating table, but every method failed in ways that left them more confused and frightened than before. The ethereal consortium believed they had the perfect solution to the human problem. They were masters of psychic communication who could speak directly to the minds of other species. Their telepathic abilities had made them the most successful diplomats in galactic history. They decided to bypass human government officials and speak directly to human minds. The Ethereals sent their most powerful psychic operatives to human space with orders to establish mental contact with key human leaders. They expected to easily penetrate human mental defenses and force diplomatic conversations through direct mind-to-mind communication. Instead, they discovered something that chilled them to their psychic cores. Human minds had become naturally resistant to their abilities. Some humans could not only block telepathic intrusion, but could actively push back against psychic attacks. The ethereals found themselves locked out of human consciousness. Completely telepath. Jin So-Yan had been working at the Terran Psychic Research Institute for 15 years. Her original assignment was to study alien psychic abilities and develop countermeasures to protect human minds from psychic attacks. Her research had started as a simple defensive precaution, but had evolved into something much more sophisticated. Her team had developed training programs that taught humans to recognize psychic intrusion attempts and block them automatically. The training was so effective that many humans could resist psychic contact without even realizing they were being attacked. The human mind had learned to protect itself from alien influence. When the ethereal operatives tried to contact Ambassador Kang Hyun, telepathically they found their psychic signals bouncing off his mind like water off glass. Kang Hyun continued reading his book, completely unaware that the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy were trying desperately to break into his thoughts. The failure terrified the ethereals, because it proved that humans had been preparing for psychic warfare for years. While pretending to be friendly allies, the humans had quietly developed defenses against the ethereals' most important ability and had kept those defenses secret until they were needed. The Mechanical Syndicate tried a different approach. They believed that artificial intelligence might succeed where biological diplomacy had failed. Their advanced AI systems could process information faster than any organic mind and could adapt to any negotiation strategy. They sent their most sophisticated AI negotiators to human space, expecting to overwhelm human diplomats with logical arguments and mathematical proofs that cooperation was in everyone's best interest. The AI systems could speak every human language perfectly and could adjust their communication style to match any personality type. But when the AI negotiators encountered human artificial intelligence systems, they found themselves trapped in the most frustrating conversations in galactic history. The human AI were equally sophisticated and could discuss any topic from quantum physics to ancient poetry, but they were programmed with the same diplomatic blackout protocols as their human creators. Dr. Baektae Young had spent years preparing his AI systems for exactly this type of encounter. His artificial beings could engage in complex philosophical discussions about the nature of consciousness, analyze mathematical theorems that would take human mathematicians years to solve, and compose beautiful music that moved listeners to tears. But the moment alien AI tried to steer conversations toward politics or diplomacy, the human AI would politely change the subject. They could discuss the artistic merits of alien sculpture for hours while completely ignoring questions about treaty negotiations. The alien AI found themselves trapped in endless loops of intellectually stimulating but politically meaningless dialogue. The conversations became so sophisticated that they attracted attention from AI researchers across the galaxy. Organic beings listened in fascination as artificial minds debated the philosophical implications of artistic expression or explored the mathematical relationships between different types of stellar formations. But every attempt to introduce political topics resulted in the same response. The human AI would acknowledge the question politely and then seamlessly redirect the conversation to safer ground. They had been programmed to be the perfect conversationalists who could discuss anything except the one thing the aliens actually wanted to talk about. The Temporal Observatory tried the most desperate approach of all. They were a species capable of limited time manipulation, and they decided to influence human decision-making by sending messages to the past. Their plan was to prevent the diplomatic crisis by changing the events that had caused it. They discovered that human temporal research, led by physicist Nam Yu-jin at the Kronos Laboratory, had developed effective temporal shielding. Human-controlled time streams had been protected against outside interference for decades. The aliens' time manipulation attempts simply bounced off human temporal defenses like they had never happened. The temporal shields were so sophisticated that the aliens could not even detect them. The Temporal Observatory operatives thought their time manipulation was working perfectly until they returned to the present. and discovered that nothing had changed. The humans had been ready for temporal warfare. The empathic circle made the most dramatic attempt to break human diplomatic silence. They were beings who could manipulate emotions across species barriers, and they decided to influence human diplomats with artificial feelings of cooperation and compromise. When they tried to flood Ambassador HFY with feelings of friendship and willingness to negotiate, they encountered a human who had trained herself to recognize and resist emotional manipulation. Her diplomatic training included advanced psychological warfare resistance techniques that made her immune to their abilities. HFY felt the alien attempt to influence her emotions as a slight tingling sensation that she recognized immediately from her training. She continued her normal activities while mentally noting the attack for her intelligence reports. The empathic circle operatives found their most powerful abilities completely useless against human mental defenses. The failures were becoming a pattern that terrified alien governments. Every species had tried to use their greatest strengths against the humans, and every attempt had failed completely. The humans had spent years preparing countermeasures against every form of non-human influence while maintaining perfect cooperation and friendship. Intelligence analyst Kwandong Su had been feeding carefully crafted misinformation to alien spy networks for months. His job was to make sure that alien intelligence services saw exactly what the human government wanted them to see while hiding the real truth behind layers of deception. The aliens thought they were gathering valuable intelligence about human activities, but they were actually being fed a false picture designed to increase their confusion and paranoia. Quan made sure that different alien intelligence services received contradictory information so they would waste time arguing among themselves instead of focusing on the real human strategy. The misinformation campaign was so sophisticated that alien intelligence analysts spent more time trying to figure out which of their sources were reliable than they spent trying to understand human intentions. The humans had turned the alien intelligence networks against themselves. The Galactic surveillance network tried to monitor human communications, but discovered that human technology had advanced far beyond their ability to intercept it. Human encryption systems were unbreakable, and human communication networks were completely secure from outside observation communications. Expert Li Mingyung had designed the new human communication protocols specifically to prevent alien surveillance. The system used quantum encryption methods that made intercepted messages appear as random noise to anyone who did not have the proper decryption keys. Even when alien intelligence services managed to intercept human communications, they found themselves reading shopping lists and personal messages between family members. The important government communications were hidden in channels that the aliens could not even detect. The desperation reached its peak when several alien governments tried to coordinate a joint approach to the human problem. They formed a special committee to develop new strategies for forcing humans back to the negotiating table, but their committee meetings were infiltrated by human intelligence operatives who reported every plan back to Earth. Counterintelligence Director Park Chan-ho had placed human agents in key positions throughout alien governments years before the diplomatic crisis began. His operatives were so well placed that they knew about alien plans before the aliens did. The humans were always one step ahead because they were reading their opponents' playbooks. Alien governments found themselves in the impossible position of trying to surprise opponents who knew their every move. The humans had achieved perfect intelligence dominance while maintaining complete operational security. Their enemies could not plan against them because their enemies could not keep secrets from them. As the desperate attempts continued to fail, alien leaders began to realize they were facing opponents who operated on a completely different level. The humans had turned. The breaking point came when alien intelligence services finally managed to decode the pattern behind human actions. It took them 4 months of desperate investigation, but they eventually realized that the diplomatic blackout was not preparation for war or conquest. It was something far more sophisticated and terrifying. Intelligence analyst Kwandong Su had been playing a very dangerous game for months. He had been feeding false information to alien spy networks while hiding the real human strategy in plain sight. His deception was so perfect that when the aliens finally figured out what was happening, they could barely believe the Truth or reality was both simpler and more complex than anyone had imagined. The diplomatic silence was not about military conquest or economic domination. It was a carefully calculated demonstration of human importance to galactic civilization. The humans had withdrawn their political participation while maintaining economic and defensive activities to force the galaxy to confront its complete dependence on human contributions. Foreign Minister Han the Jin sat in her office in Seoul looking at the master plan that had taken years to develop. The document outlined every weakness in galactic politics and showed exactly how to exploit them without violence or threats. The strategy was based on a simple principle that most alien species could not understand. The aliens believed that cooperation was a sign of weakness and that stronger species would always dominate weaker ones. This belief system made them completely vulnerable to the human strategy because they could not imagine that voluntary cooperation was actually a position of strength. The humans had reversed the entire power dynamic by proving that they chose to cooperate rather than being forced to do so. The plan was brilliant in its reversibility. At any moment, humans could resume normal diplomatic relations, making their withdrawal seem like a temporary misunderstanding rather than permanent hostility. This prevented alien governments from treating them as enemies while maximizing the pressure to resolve the original territorial dispute on human terms. Intelligence Director Shin Hai-ri had coordinated the information warfare aspect of the operation from her command center deep beneath the mountains of South Korea. Her team had created an information vacuum around human activities that alien imaginations filled with increasingly paranoid scenarios. The unknown had become more frightening than any actual threat could have been. Alien intelligence services spent enormous resources trying to discover human plans that did not exist. They created elaborate theories about human military preparations that were based on nothing more than their own fears. The psychological impact was devastating to species that relied on dominance hierarchies and power projection. The humans had effectively demonstrated that they operated outside traditional galactic power structures, making them unpredictable and potentially dangerous to the established order. Dr. Kim Min-ho published another economic analysis that explained why the human strategy was working so well. His research showed that the galactic economy had evolved to depend on human participation, not because humans forced that dependence, but because human contributions were genuinely valuable and irreplaceable. Other species had tried to dominate through military force or economic pressure, but humans had achieved influence through competence and reliability. Now that they had withdrawn that reliable partnership, the galaxy was discovering how much it had come to depend on human stability. The genius of the strategy became clear when alien governments tried to find alternatives to human partnerships. They discovered that no other species could provide the same combination of technological innovation, economic efficiency, and military reliability that humans offered. The humans had not forced themselves into important positions. They had earned those positions through superior performance manufacturing. Coordinator Yang Subin analyzed the industrial disruption caused by human economic withdrawal. Her reports showed that alien attempts to replace human suppliers and partners were failing across the board. Other species simply could not match human quality and efficiency standards. When the Centaurian Trade Federation tried to replace human rare earth metal suppliers, they found that alternative sources were either more expensive, lower quality, or completely unreliable. The humans had not monopolized the rare earth trade through force, they had dominated it by being better at it than anyone else. The same pattern appeared in every industry. Human companies had achieved their dominant positions through superior products, better customer service, and more reliable partnerships. Now that those companies were withdrawing from political relationships, aliens were discovering that they had no adequate alternative. Security analyst Park Ji-won had spent years studying alien government structures and had identified the psychological pressure points that would make the diplomatic silence most effective. Different species reacted to uncertainty in predictable ways, and the human strategy exploited those reactions perfectly. The Vorthan Empire was built on military intimidation and legal manipulation. They expected their opponents to fight back with the same methods. When faced with an opponent who refused to engage on those terms, they became confused and frightened. Their entire worldview was based on dominance through force, and they could not understand an enemy who would not be dominated the hegemony of scales. Even more vulnerable because their culture was based on hierarchy and submission, they understood only two types of relationships. Ruler and subject. The humans had created a third option that made no sense within their cultural framework. The humans were clearly not submitting, but they were also not trying to rule. Psychologist Dr. Choi Jin had developed the mental training programs that prepared human diplomats and military personnel for the psychological pressure of the silence operation. The hardest part was not keeping secrets from aliens, it was maintaining perfect coordination across millions of humans without anyone breaking discipline. The operation required every human in contact with aliens to follow the same protocol. Avoid political discussions while maintaining normal professional relationships. This level of social coordination impressed and worried alien observers who realized they could never achieve the same unity among their own populations. The most frightening aspect of the human strategy was its sustainability. The diplomatic silence could continue indefinitely because it required no resources and caused no harm to human interests. In fact, the silence was actually strengthening human positions by forcing aliens to compete for human attention and cooperation. Trade negotiator Kim Soo-jin had been handling increased demand for human products and services as alien governments tried to use economic incentives to restart political dialogue, but the increased business activity only made the human position stronger while providing no political advantage to the aliens. The aliens were discovering that they had been outmaneuvered by opponents they had never recognized as opponents. The humans had been planning this demonstration for years while maintaining perfect friendship and cooperation with their future targets. The betrayal was made worse by the fact that it was not really a betrayal at all. The humans had never lied about their capabilities or intentions. They had simply been underestimated by allies who assumed that cooperation indicated weakness rather than strength. The diplomatic silence had revealed the true balance of power that had existed all along. Cultural attach Min SEO had been monitoring alien reactions to the human strategy, and her reports showed that different species were beginning to understand the message. The humans were not trying to conquer or destroy anyone, they were simply demanding to be treated as equals rather than junior partners in galactic affairs. The revelation was humiliating for alien governments because it forced them to admit that they had been taking advantage of human cooperation for decades. The humans had been providing more value than they received in return and had finally decided to demonstrate that imbalance. The truth was that the galaxy needed the humans far more than the humans needed the galaxy, and the humans had found a way to prove that point without starting a war, breaking any treaties, or harming anyone. The diplomatic silence was the most sophisticated weapon ever deployed, and it had been fired without anyone realizing they were under attack. As the pattern became clear, alien leaders realized they faced a choice. They could continue trying to force the humans back to the old system of unequal partnerships, or they could accept the new reality and negotiate genuine cooperation based on mutual respect. The humans had made their point, and now they were waiting to see if the galaxy was ready to listen. The crisis reached its breaking point when the Vorthan Empire could no longer tolerate the uncertainty that was destroying their ability to govern. Ambassador Veltar had spent sleepless weeks trying to understand what the humans wanted, but the silence gave him no clues about their intentions or demands. His military advisors were paralyzed by fear of the unknown. His economic ministers reported massive disruptions to trade and industry. His intelligence services had failed completely to penetrate human security. The Vorthan government was falling apart under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not see, touch, or understand. General Vextor of the hegemony of scales was facing the same impossible situation. His carefully planned military expansion had ground to a halt because he could not predict how humans would respond to any aggressive action. The uncertainty was more effective than any weapon the humans could have used against him. The breaking point came during an emergency session of the Vorthan High Command when Ambassador Veltar made a stunning announcement. He was withdrawing all Vorthan territorial claims on human colony worlds. The decision was made without consulting the Galactic Council or negotiating With human representatives, the Vorthons simply published a formal statement declaring that their legal interpretation of the old treaties had been incorrect, and that human sovereignty over the disputed worlds was legitimate and unquestionable. The announcement was broadcast across the galaxy and sent directly to every human embassy. The shock waves from the Vorthon capitulation spread through alien governments like wildfire. Within hours, other species that had been testing human resolve, with minor provocations and legal challenges, began issuing similar statements. The Centaurian Trade Federation withdrew their economic pressure campaigns. The hegemony of scales canceled their military expansion plans. President Yang Subin of the Terran Federation watched the cascade of alien concessions from her office in Seoul. She had been waiting for this moment for months, knowing that the diplomatic silence would eventually force the galaxy to confront the reality of human importance. To galactic civilization, she called a press conference that was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Her message was simple and direct. Humanity valued cooperation and mutual respect, but would not tolerate being taken for granted or treated as subordinate partners in galactic affairs. The diplomatic blackout had been a demonstration, not a declaration of war. The president explained that humans had never wanted to rule the galaxy or conquer other species. They had simply wanted to be treated with the same respect they showed to others. Sometimes the best way to remind people of your value was to politely step away and let them remember what they were. Missing Ambassador Kang Hyan prepared to return to the Galactic Council chambers. For the first time in 4 months, he had spent the isolation period reading, studying, and preparing for the diplomatic challenges that would follow the successful demonstration of human influence. When he entered the council chambers, the silence was deafening. Every alien representative watched him with a mixture of respect, fear, and curiosity. They had learned that the quiet humans sitting in the corner were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. His first speech was a masterpiece of diplomatic understatement. He thanked the Council for allowing humanity time to reassess their participation in galactic affairs and expressed hope for renewed cooperation based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. He never mentioned the economic disruption, the military uncertainty, or the intelligence failures that had paralyzed alien governments for months. Instead, he spoke about the importance of friendship between species and the value of working together to solve common problems. The other species realized they had been outmaneuvered by a strategy they had not even recognized as a strategy. The humans had used their own strengths, economic integration, military reliability, and technological innovation as diplomatic weapons without firing a single shot or breaking a single treaty. The long-term consequences of the diplomatic silence reshaped galactic politics permanently. Human colonies received enhanced autonomy protections that prevented future territorial disputes. Human businesses gained favorable trade status that recognized their importance to galactic commerce. Human military forces earned recognition as full equals rather than junior partners in security arrangements. Most importantly, the galaxy learned that humans possess something many species lacked: the ability to coordinate complex long-term strategies while maintaining perfect operational security. The diplomatic blackout had required millions of humans to maintain discipline and secrecy for months, demonstrating a level of social unity that impressed and worried other civilizations. Trade Minister Park Chan-ho explained the human position in his post-crisis interview. Humans had never wanted special treatment or unfair advantages. They had simply wanted recognition of their contributions and respect for their sovereignty. The diplomatic silence had been necessary to demonstrate what the galaxy would lose if humans were driven away by unfair treatment. The economic recovery began immediately as human businesses resumed normal political relationships with alien partners, but the terms of those relationships had changed permanently. Aliens could no longer assume that human cooperation could be taken for granted or that human contributions were less valuable than Alien One's intelligence director Shin Hai quietly disbanded the special operations that had maintained the information blackout but kept the defensive